This is the There Is Another Way podcast from spencerbruce.com. Making life work as a creative. Welcome to the Creativity Kickstarter podcast, a podcast to help inspire, develop and support your creative process. In this podcast, I'm going to talk about something which I have been seeing a lot of recently with my students and various creative friends who I talk to on a regular basis. And it is the fact that many of them seem to be actually scared to create. Not necessarily scared to do the things that they're doing, but actually be fully creative and fully immersed in their practice and in their art, because they are being constrained by external pressures. Now, if you go back to previous podcasts, I have talked about what I believe some of these external pressures are. And many of these pressures seem to come from things like social media, the internet, Googling things that tell you the way that you need to be doing things. And it's almost like it's trying to provide you with a checklist of things that you must do before you can either start your creative process or develop your creative process, or indeed release your work into the world, because you may not have ticked off any of these boxes. The reason I'm bringing this topic back again is because it's become really evident in the last couple of months that the people I've been working with seem really stuck in the idea that they can't express themselves the way they want to because they don't have all the skills that they need to know to use a piece of software, for example. They need to know what the end user wants, or they need to have read every blog post about the subject before you can actually begin. And I think this is a really worrying trend, and I wonder if you, the listener, are suffering from this. And if you are, please do let me know. Please do send me a message at neil@spencerbruce.com. But I think one of the things is perhaps that we're not aware. And I think part of the evidence that I have been seeing is the people that I've been working with aren't necessarily aware that they are scared, for want of a better word, of their creative process. They're just really unsure about doing the wrong thing, which is exactly what creativity should be about overcoming, because technically your practice is your practice. What you do is what you do, and what you create is what you create from your heart, not from a checklist from a YouTube video or from a blog site. Now, of course, there is some great advice out there. There are podcasts like this one who have done things like the 10 things you need to do in the past. But I've steered away from that from a long time now, because I really it's quite detrimental, because there is no checklist. They're merely suggestions, and they're merely suggestions that may or may not work with you. If we go back to the previous podcast, Get a Grip, you will see that I have been going through a little bit of this process myself, where I've been creating for other people, not for myself. And I mean that in a way of my work means that I create for other people, which is fine. I'm not talking about that. But I mean, when I am creating my own work, I am second guessing a lot of the time what people want. And I don't know where this, or at least I didn't know where this second guessing came from. And I've been thinking back to when I started out and how I would just, for want of a better word, play. Art is a way of expressing yourself. It is a way of playing. It is a way of releasing stress. And most importantly, as I've just said, it is a way of expressing what you're feeling through your own actions. Now, of course, we all want to improve. We all want to improve. We all want to develop our skills. But if you are scared to create, if you're scared to jump in, we are not really developing our skills, because what we are doing are learning lessons from either books or online or blogs, as I've said a number of times now, and feeling that we have to apply that rather than just getting in there, getting our hands dirty and seeing what comes out. I ultimately believe that is where the questions come from. And I've probably said this 1,000 times on the podcast. To me, learning is all about asking questions. It's not about me or another teacher standing and telling you what to do. It is about you doing something and being guided through that process when you have your own questions. You know, imagine that you really wanted to get into sculpture, perhaps. The best thing to do is to start sculpting. And as you are sculpting, If it's not going the way that you want, then you ask a mentor to guide you, to give you the tips and advice, rather than you try and learn every single tip, every single sculpting technique before you start. And then you've got too much information, you don't know what to do, so you don't create anything, and you become scared. And I can't think of a better word for it than being scared to actually jump in, being scared of what people think. And I think that is the other crux of the point that we have here. Many of us, particularly, say, for example, my students, are trying to monetize. Monetize has become this word, and it's a word that I'm beginning to hate with a passion, because it seems everything needs to be monetized. Now, of course, we need money to live. And as freelancers, and you can listen to a lot of the advice on this podcast, much of it is about how we earn money. But if I reflect back on the 7+ years of this podcast, my views have changed, and I will happily eat my own words from previous podcasts, because I no longer believe in some of the methods that I spoke about earlier on, because the world has changed. We have developed. I've learned about myself. I've learned much more about how I function, and the things that I'm able to do, and the things that I'm able to, for want of a better word, earn money from. Ultimately, pursuing my creative work with the quest of money has been the thing that I have been least successful at. And that is a bit of a shock. And it's a bit of a shock to say this after this podcast has been running for so long. But it's true. The things that I've really forced myself into to earn a few bucks have usually not earned as much as I hoped. And I've also been creatively dry, and it shows the authenticity. I always talk about authenticity. I really realized that it's not authentically who I am. This time of reflecting inwards has given me the courage, again, not to be scared about being authentic, making the things that I am good at, doing the processes that I am good at, and developing the creative content that I am good at. And what my evidential work has shown is when I stopped being scared, when I stopped doing things that fell into the kind of constructs of ideas that people were expecting, or what you believe the internet is expecting or social media is expecting, then better work was produced. And it's work that came so naturally that I didn't really think it was work. It felt too like, I just enjoyed that. And ultimately, that is the work which has resonated most with my fans, listeners, viewers. It's such a striking message. That is the reason why I felt I needed to dedicate this podcast to the idea about stop being scared to create. I know it can sound intimidating. I know if you've got this idea that you've got to earn from your creativity, that it's got to be something that everyone wants. I fully appreciate that. And it's really, really hard to earn from your creativity if you feel that you're doing something which is just for you and maybe no one else wants. But I strongly advise to, at least some of the time, create something exclusively for yourself. Something which takes you back to where you first started on this journey of creativity. If you pick up a pen, just draw. Don't worry if the lines are straight. Don't worry if you're not using the right pen. Don't worry if YouTube has told you that you're using the wrong paper and you've not put it on social media, etc., etc. It doesn't matter. You don't need to share everything. Maybe actually we need to stop sharing as much, because a lot of the mystique of the process is gone, but a lot of the ability to focus on the task is gone, as if you're creating something and you're thinking at the same time, well, I need to turn this into a video because I was told to do that, because that's how I'm going to get more viewers and blah, 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 blah. You know, perhaps all of the messages, all of the things that we're being told to do. Maybe it's time to rebel. I really do think it's time to rebel against this construct that we've got in. I talked about rebellion again in the Get a Grip podcast. It's become a big mantra to myself. Rebelling against the AI, rebelling against the way that computers and software companies and social media are now controlling the way that we think. And I don't mean that in a kind of Skynet way. I don't mean that they're literally controlling it, but I believe for many of us, they have got into our subconscious, and we overthink things rather than we're just sat in a room with no technology or at very least the technology we need to do the thing that we do. It could be a knife if you're doing sculpture. It could be a pencil. That's your technology. It could be a camera. It could be a recorder. It could be a synthesizer. But you sit in the room. We don't think about the internet. And if you try to do that for a moment, I understand it. It does seem a bit scary. Maybe that's where some of this scaredness is coming from, that it's scary to think of creating something in the real world that may not go online, may not be part of a website, may not exist anywhere, but in the moment that you are creating it, and sit with it in the real world for a while, and then maybe find another way of, for want of a better word, I'm going to use the M word again, monetizing it. Go to a local exhibition and try and sell it. And I'm going to probably guess you might earn more from that one sale than you'll probably earn from a lot of time online. So I'd really be interested to hear your thoughts about whether you feel scared to create. And perhaps, like I say, maybe it's not something you're consciously aware of. And perhaps it's someone like me, a teacher, is looking at, my students look a bit scared. They seem there's something inhibiting them from feeling that they can just do what they want to do to express themselves. That's the creative task for this week. Don't be scared. Go and create whatever you want to create, however you want to create it. Switch off from, or try to switch your brain off from thinking about this as a piece of content that needs to be sold or monetized or put online or anything like that. Just have fun with your creativity. Explore it, get lost in it, and see what comes out. I hope you found that useful. Please do subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. That would be really helpful. If you do like the podcast and you want to help support us, then you can use the Buy Me a Coffee link below. That would be really helpful to keep up the uprunning of the podcast. And of course, there is the Creativity Kickstarter, 100 Ways to Kickstart Your Creativity book, available on Amazon for 100 ideas to get over writer's block. I've been Brucey, but most importantly, take care, my friends, and I will catch you later.